Hello guys, here's a cool painting, and here we're going to talk about why you should learn to be selfish in your forgiveness. Because the person you're forgiving, they don't deserve it, but you do. Forgiveness isn't the selfless act of virtue a lot of us grew up with. In fact, forgiveness done well is actually a selfish thing. To forgive correctly is to be selfish. And now that may sound counterintuitive. So, what do I mean by that? Well, to explain this, we first have to talk about what resentment actually is. And after we've defined that, go over our traditional notions of forgiveness and why they miss the mark. And we introduce the idea of selfish forgiveness and why a lot of the time it's better in practice. Then we'll go over actionable steps you can do to actually free yourself from resentment and forgive properly. And we'll go over this at a cognitive and mental level, as well as a relational level. Then we'll end the video off with a summary. Shoutouts to the vehicles outside. So, first off, what is resentment? You may have heard of the saying, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. And it's true. Resentment kills you, quite literally. It eats you up from the inside, it brings a lot of stress into your life, and it's even been linked to various physical problems like ulcers, high blood pressure, and a weakened immune system. We don't want that. It's a corrosive poison that works slowly and interferes with your life, your mental health, and overall well-being. And most of us know this. Most of us know that resentment isn't good for us, but a lot of us may justify our resentment towards someone because we think we need it to catalyze change. A lot of us confuse resentment with moral outrage or a sense of moral justice. We think of it as a desire to make things right, for offenders to be punished, for justice to be served. And because of this, we resent the offender that wronged us. They deserve it, right? They deserve our hate because they're a bad person. But this is where we get it all wrong. Let's go back to that quote. It said that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. Resentment isn't moral outrage directed at someone else. It's drinking the poison hoping it will kill someone else. But that's the thing. It doesn't kill them. It's killing you. Resentment isn't about the other person, it's about you. Resentment won't harm the target, especially if they don't care, right? Rather, it's a self-inflicted form of harm. You could say that resentment is self-harm because you hold on to bitterness, hurt, and let it eat up at your self-worth and well-being. And we think it's directed towards someone else, but really it's directed towards ourselves, or at least we're the only ones that feel it. And as I said, resentment is self-harm. And when you realize that, you start to see that there's no good reason to hold on to it. There's really no good reason to hold on to resentment. And everyone knows that it's not good to hold on to resentment, which is why a lot of us have been taught to forgive and to let go. But in my experience, our traditional notions of forgiveness can prevent us from properly forgiving and at times even make things worse. So let's talk about that. So, speaking on traditional notions of forgiveness, a lot of us hold the notion that forgiveness is about forgetting. It's about trusting the offender again and restoring our bond with them. And if you grew up with Christianity, you may be familiar with this kind of thinking. You've heard of the classic, love your enemy and treat them like they are your neighbor. Forgive them, love them, let them into your home. And just for a disclaimer, this is the understanding I grew up with. Yours may be different, and this isn't to generalize anything about Christianity in general. This video isn't about Christianity. But back to the topic, It's said that you should forgive your offender and restore your bond with them. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. That can be a good thing, especially if the offender is a good person that cares about you and they unintentionally harmed you. Sometimes, however, this approach to forgiveness can feel impossible if the offender doesn't care about you, if they have power over you, or if they're just straight up a bad person. So, for example, there have been churches wherein someone in the church was raped by a fellow church member, and people within the church said they needed to forgive the rapist and stay friends with them because it was the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do, they say. It's the Christian thing to do. And this kind of forgiveness, right, when someone has wronged you, it can seem noble at the surface, but it often fails to address the root of resentment in the case of most people. It can be forced and used as a band aid, and even put yourself in future danger if you continue staying in the presence of the offender. You know, it's really just not beneficial a lot of the time. Especially if you're dealing with, bad people or like a narcissist or someone that holds power over you, it's difficult. So here we introduce the idea of selfish forgiveness. Selfish forgiveness. So in selfish forgiveness, it's not about forgiving the other person. It's not about restoring your bond with them. It's not about them at all. It's about you. And that's the main thing. Forgiveness is all about you. It's about stopping the emotional bleed, letting the resentment and bitterness go without necessarily re-engaging the offender. You do it for you, and you only do the work in restoring your bond with another person if they're truly good for you and if they really deserve it, and vice versa. If you forgive a snake for biting you, it doesn't mean sticking out your hand again for a second bite. You know that the snake isn't trustworthy. So you can learn not to trust someone who isn't trustworthy. You can take bad people out of your life. You hold no ill will against them, but you will no longer participate in their company to avoid further harm because it's for you. So I just want you, to drill down the idea that forgiveness is purely for you, not them. It's about taking away the power they have over you as a result of your resentment. It's about taking your life back and not letting this poison eat you up from the inside. So drop the poison. Drop the poison. And, that's the main thing. So how do we drop this poison? And how do we actually free ourselves from resentment? So here we get to actionable steps we can do to addressing our resentment. So resentment is something that may take time to go away completely, especially if it's something that's built up over years and years of maltreatment. It's a deeply ingrained pattern of thoughts and feelings that have been reinforced for so long, and one you continue to reinforce. Depending on the kind and level of resentment you're dealing with, it may take longer or shorter, to let go of. But either way, there are things you can do to reverse these patterns and eventually free yourself from the poison you've burdened yourself with. So, on a more cognitive and mental level, whenever someone you resent comes to mind, you may notice that you think a variety of negative thoughts towards them. So some simplified examples I've put here is, I hate him, or why do you have to do this? Or like, I wish him the worst, or they're no good, or fuck him, man, fuck him. Yeah, I put a lull there. I forgot to remove that. We'll keep that there. Okay, but whenever these come up, the best thing you can do is, number one, accept the thoughts, let them be, and recognize them for what they are. Thoughts of resentment that are harming you and your well-being. They're harming you. And, to address them, you can counter them with new thoughts to stop old patterns of resentment and create new patterns of forgiveness. And, these can be anything simple, really. And here's some examples I've put here. So let's say you think of a person you're resenting and you're thinking resentful thoughts. You can do something as simple as think, I wish them the best. If you're feeling good and you think they deserve it and they're a good person, yeah, they did this to me, but I wish them the best. But if that isn't the case, then you can just be indifferent. I wish them nothing, and they are no longer relevant in my life. If you don't think they deserve your best wishes, don't give them your best wishes. Just wish them nothing. But the point is, you're creating these new thought patterns that counter old ones. And so the more you do this, right, repetition leads to change. The effects may not be immediate, but that's where intention and discipline come in. It's about reinforcing these new thought patterns for your own sake. If you want to change the way you feel, you need to change the way you think. And that will take practice, that will take intention. So now we go on to what we can do on a more relational level. So the externals matter a lot as well when it comes to letting go of resentment, right? Because there's a reason usually why we feel resentment. And so there are things you can and probably should do about them. So as you can imagine, it can be very hard to let go of resentment if the person you resent is always there and repeatedly hurting you. And so, in that case, you can either one, settle things with them, recognize and express all the hurt, shame, and other emotions underlying that resentment and go from there. And, you do this if they're a good person, if they're someone that you love and, they care about you. If they love you, they will put in the work, in your relationship and improving it. Otherwise, remove them from your life as much as possible. Practice some self-respect by protecting your peace and prioritizing the people that give you life, not the ones that take away from it. Now, I recognize that this may be difficult if you live in the same household as them or if they have power over you. I understand how hard that can be. And in that case, do what you can and prioritize letting go at an internal level. But really, if you have an opportunity to cut them off and remove them from your life, whether you're dealing with a narcissist or a very cruel person taking advantage of you, or just any bad person, really, get them out of your life like as soon as possible. So yeah, to summarize everything, right? Everything that we've been talking about. Resentment isn't about others, it's about yourself. And it's the same with forgiveness, and forgiveness done well. The moment you embrace selfish forgiveness and you do it for you, it becomes so much easier. You don't need permission to forgive someone. You don't need to feel like someone else deserves your forgiveness because a lot of the time they don't deserve your forgiveness. But do it for you. Drop the poison and take back your life. And you can do this by either reinforcing positive or neutral thought patterns to replace negative ones every time they come up. Repeating like, I wish them the best, or I wish them nothing, right? Or, on a relational level, express your hurt and settle things with the offender, or remove them from your life as much as possible and move on. And if you do all of these things, baby, you got freedom. Freedom from resentment, freedom from so much stress. Yeah. Yeah. It may be quick or it may be a lifelong process, and that will depend on the person, but ultimately the responsibility is yours. You just have to do what you can. But with all of that said, best wishes, my fellow peasants. and I hope you have a good morning. I'm trying out, this new format because I feel like it's a pretty efficient way of getting my thoughts out. And I first saw this from another YouTuber that I saw called Daniel Barada or something like that. They have really good stuff, so check them out. But yeah, I just wanted to try it, and yeah, just let me know if you like it as well. But that's all from now. I hope you have a good morning. Peace.